Okay, we are here for episode 246 of Trek Live. Still not live, but we're getting there. We're slow walking our return here with occasional episodes of pre-recorded material, but these have been a lot of fun. I'm glad to be edging back into this. How you doing this morning?
Doing good. Really excited to be talking about some Voyager, summarizing our thoughts for Prodigy,
Yeah,
and kind of going through that. So we're going to be talking a lot about a certain time and area in the Star Trek universe. So I'm really excited about it.
yeah. Voyager and Prodigy really are they go pretty easily hand in hand, especially season two of Prodigy when you're getting a lot of Chakotay, a lot of the Doctor. There's just in the main credits seeing Kate Mulgrew, Robert Beltran, Robert Picardo's names all there. Uh, Pretty neat. Um, so we're going to kick this off and do kind of an extended rewatch recap. I think this is a big deal for you. You got into Voyager after a break with baby season and Discovery being on season 5. You're kind of diving back into your kind of rewatch pattern, and you elected to go into Voyager, which I think is awesome because you're a Voyager guy, and it's been a long time since you've seen it. So, finished season 1. Really eager to hear your thoughts. I did season 1 of Voyager a little while ago, but it's fairly fresh. So, we're going to put up some ranks here in a minute on the screen. Comparative stuff. You'll see Dan's, you'll see mine from my most recent rewatch, or the one you just finished. There's some cool differences, and I can't wait to talk about it. But before we get into the ranks, how did it feel watching Voyager for the first time in a long time like that? And what are your kind of overall
It
takeaways?
feels it feels really good to be back in Voyager, and I know that I think at this point it's almost a staple for a new Berman era Star Trek series to feel like the show before that, right? Like early TNG, we get some really TOS vibey types of episodes and themes covered, and I think there's some similar stuff in Voyager season 1 with some of these scripts and stories could feel like swap out TNG cast in
Yeah,
for um, Voyager cast, and I think it works out the same way. But I think that's to me that instead of a negative, that just feels like that's what Permanent Trek
it's part of the
does.
process. Show finding its sea
And
legs.
so, um, but I really think there's some really good serialization with the Maquis stuff, especially in season 1,
Yeah,
and then some really good developmental stuff of not just these characters, but of just the quadrant that we're in and kind of
yeah.
exploring that type of thing. So I think all really good stuff. At least for me, I think Voyager goes down really easy for me, and so some of these episodes I might just hold higher than in other people.
That's why we
Um,
do this. It's awesome.
just because I like Voyager so much, and again, there's some relatively big differences. I think Bill mentioned at the top of the show, but we'll talk about it and go through it here. But really happy to be back in Voyager.
Did it feel fresh? Like, how much of it did you, as it kind of got going past the pilot, did the episodes feel like as soon as they started, you kind of knew what they were, you remembered them, or did it feel like, oh, I don't really remember where this is going often? Like, how did your, because this is like your third time through watching it this way, like, how did it,
Yeah, I think the front half and the back half feel more familiar to me. It's just like some of the middle stuff. I think kind of get like as far as like not just the show, but this season. I think at the start of the season, I feel like I remember more of the episodes a little bit better, and then at the end, like learning curve, I kind of knew what was going to
coming there?
happen there. But
Yeah.
but yeah, it's just kind of in that middle. It kind of I guess that helps me because I was definitely familiar with some of these episodes, but I think the freshness, um, the Golden Gate theory, I think really helps. Even there's going to be some rough patches in season 2 and 3, but I think it's a good time for me that it's like there's some still familiar, like there's some familiar aspects of some of these episodes, but there's some stuff that I was just like completely spaced that, or completely was it this person that did that, or was it this person that did that? So I think it's a good time, and it feels fresh enough. I wouldn't say like some of these episodes where I wasn't like, I have no idea what happens in this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I also like there's some episodes where I know generally what happens, but again, I
Yeah.
think it's perfect having.
Yeah, and I know that that factors into your kind of rewatch. Like you kind of want to allow enough time to have some of that there. I mean, right?
Yeah,
Like
which
that's. Mm-hmm.
yeah, which is the goal, to keep it as fresh as possible. But when you're talking about a franchise that's pushing like over 900 episodes, I think
Mm-hmm.
as time goes on, that's just gonna
Yeah,
it's gonna be an easier and easier job, because hopefully there'll be more episodes to watch.
yeah, yeah. I'm definitely finding that. Like when I first did this on Twitter back in like 15, I think it was 2015 was the first one. Uh, there were like, what was it back then? I guess it was still like 700 some, and it felt like a lot. But like it feels like a lot more now. It's only maybe a couple hundred more, but even now, like for my rewatch, I'm into Discovery, I'm into the new stuff, and I still got a long way to go, just through that. Like another almost 200 episodes to deal with, and by the time I'm through it, TOS is a long time ago for me. Like it's a couple of years ago, and for me, that's a long time. So yeah, you're right. I think just because of the nature of how much of it there is and how it's still growing, uh, that that becomes a lot easier than maybe it was even 10 years ago when it was kind of uh, locked in with the five shows, like the traditional five old school stuff before Discovery. So cool. All right, I'm going to put the ranks up just to kind of drive the conversation a little bit and give us a place to go. Because this is not live, you can't see what I'm about to put up, but I did send them to you, so you have
It's in our
pictures.
chat,
Yeah,
so
yeah, you can.
yeah, I should be able to see it.
Right. So we have the same top three with a little slight difference. You have Caretaker at one. I have it at two. I have the Needle at one. You have it at two, and we both have Jatrell at three. So there's a lot of simpatico on kind of the maybe upper tier of episodes for the season. I personally would probably, I, I didn't put grades on mine for this. I have grades, but not on the image I'm putting up right here. Um, I feel like that is a tier for me. I feel like I had the Needle, Caretaker, Jatrell, maybe a little bit of a dip after that for me. Would you kind of agree with that looking at yours? Like, do you see that being like a clear top three? Or do you think, like for you, you have Phage and Learning Curve, like, are they bubbling up right alongside those?
No, I agree with you. It's definitely a tier.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a tier above some of that, like 4 on to maybe 7 or 8. I think there's
That's
a
the
clear
next clump.
difference there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think we probably agree with like even maybe some different episodes in those groupings, but right around those same numbers. I think looking at where I am, I think 4 through 8 for me is like the B tier, really good solid episodes for me, and then maybe 9 down. We're getting into more um, mixed to good, mixed to weak, and then down towards the bottom are episodes I'm not as into. Um, I can tell you right now, I did some very very complicated math and looked at the differences in our episodes before we started here. I Heroes and Demons is a 10 spot difference. I have it at 5. You have 15 at the bottom of your list, so that's an obvious one we're obviously gonna have to touch on. Then there's 3 that have a 6 spot difference, and in a 15 slot ranking here, that's a pretty significant difference. We have Cathexis, Time and Again, and Learning Curve, all of which you have higher than me by 6 spots. So we have 4 of the 15 that are pretty wildly different in placement. I guess we got to
Yeah,
start with Heroes and Demons. That's where you have at the bottom.
we
Let's
do.
get that out of the way as like the maybe thing that.
uh
Mhm.
I don't know how to, and it was like the that and Parallax and Cathexis, I think, were my like 3 episodes that I was just tinkering with so much.
Mhm.
And so Heroes and Demons, okay, how do I justify this? I cannot. It's hard for me to get on board for, and I know I'm really even. It's this early, right? Voyager goes back to the well of the holodeck a lot,
Yeah, they
and
do.
so that feels like maybe it's just a little bit lower than it normally would. Again, this is my first time going through like a completely, ranking the all these episodes, but um, so yeah, and I think some of these episodes that maybe I can talk about. So yeah, again, that's a reason why it's just a little bit lower. Not a little bit, a lot of it lower. It's like I have a trouble getting on board with, again, another holodeck story. But I'm gonna try to stay positive here. I like the thing that I really like about it is that um, the doctor stuff with like Kess is really the mentor,
Yes.
and the doctor is the mentee, and
Yes.
so that stuff is like super super strong and
Yes.
really really good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this is kind of where it maybe why it's so low is like in cathexis, like there's a point in the doctor where I was like, well, the doctor can handle this um this issue, this alien that's trying to terrorizing the ship and
Mm-hmm.
making it so we can't go back to this nebula, but we don't actually want to go back to the nebula. So it's just like, man, I wish that it was just like he was able to in cathexis be like the catalyst to be able to turn that story around, like that, just put more weight. It's hard because like, and maybe it's just because I have such a high regard for the doctor. It's like just he's not treated well, but he's like this super advanced like entity. Like
Yeah.
put some respect and some weight back into his position and his just him as a person. And so yeah, that's why I have a tough time like just delegating him just to the holodeck and
Mm-hmm.
like some training wheels and stuff. And um, so again, that's maybe why Heroes and Demons is a little bit low. And um, cathexis. I think that's the episode, right? That's
Right
where
after.
Tuvok is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just think that I kind of wish that he was able to. I don't know.
Be more of a. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I do think he kind of gets
Be
sidelined
more of
there.
yeah,
They lean on the Chakotay
and it's
mystical, like that kind of
yeah,
stuff is, yeah.
but it's like he just gets it so easily dismissed away from because it's Tuvok doing that thing, and it just was
Right.
wish that like yeah, again a little bit more respect on it.
Well, it's definitely kind of jarring, especially as somebody, if you stay away from Voyager for a while, like you did, and you go back to the beginning, having like later Voyager more prominently in your head. I think it can be easy to forget like how far the Doctor comes, not just in his own like how he views himself, but how the crew views him, like how mean they are to him early, and how like ostracized he is and brushed aside. And I think that's why Kess, Kess is kind of I think a mixed bag for me as a character in some ways, but completely successful with what you just said. Like on the surface, you look at Kess as the mentee, and the doctor is the mentor for like the learning the medical stuff, learning how to be a nurse, learning how to do that job that she's kind of tasked with. But for all the other things, like how to be a person, how to deal with people, how to embrace friendships and develop a bedside manner and earn the respect of your crew. That's all Kess mentoring the doctor,
Yeah,
and that that's really well done. And I think it's the best thing that Kess gets to do in her 3 years on the show, especially early on. I think the way that they kind of run that little arc you talked about at the beginning, like there is some, especially with the Maquis, some serialized arcs kind of weaving through these episodes. I think that's another one. I think the way that Kess kind of advocates for the Doctor along the way in these little moments, sometimes throwaway moments in these episodes, is another really nice little arc where she's like, people are kind of mean to him, and maybe not
yeah,
justifiably so, and it's not a good look. I think she really puts a lot of notches in that, whittling that away over the first season and a half. I guess. But Heroes and Demons, the way you said at the beginning, like many of the other Berman shows, the early days of the series kind of borrow a lot from previous shows before the new show kind of finds its sea legs and develops its own thing. Heroes and Demons does feel very much like a TNG holodeck accident kind of episode.
Yeah.
The unique quality of it is the main character is also a hologram, and there's some. What I like about it is everything you're saying, I agree with, and I have difficulty with the way the crew interacts with the Doctor, and I think that's so heavily leaned on for most of the first season. Heroes and Demons, what it does do for me is it's the kind of only time in the first season that you get to see the Doctor kind of outside of that constraint. Like his story in that isn't completely reliant on that part of his arc. But I totally get where you're coming from, that it feels at times kind of redundant and very much talking to what's come before.
Yeah.
Structurally, like the kind of episode it is.
Yeah. And I guess I could be talked into like, well, these the Knights of the Round Table are treating him like he's nothing, and it's similar to the crew that's treating him. Yeah. So it's just like
everywhere he goes, he's like,
yeah, I definitely get that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, I don't know. Again, this is my new. This is first time going through it.
Sure. Yeah.
Always will be tinkering, like I said. Cathexis and Parallax and Heroes and Demons were just like those ones that I necessarily didn't know what to do, but moved those episodes around quite a bit. And yeah, I think my favorite thing about I guess just some of these episodes, just in general, is whenever we get that serialization where if it's just like, and it doesn't have to necessarily be the Maquis stuff. And I think there's some really great stuff with that. And, we get some introductions and some side characters that I think will come to play a little bit later on. But there's also some really good serialization where like, we need this type of thing. We don't have it. We're looking for it. Is there, someone or somewhere we could find it? I just think there's some really good serialization in this season, even if it's not a very good episode or towards the bottom of my list in this season. So again, I don't want to reiterate, if you're on the bottom, if these episodes are on the bottom half, I'd rather be watching these bottom half episodes almost any other TV out there. So again, It's just like I want to reiterate that.
Well, yeah, you're preaching to the choir there. I talked about that the last time we were here with the rewatch and the new stuff, having to really lean into that for folks who might look at like stuff at the bottom of the list and think, it's garbage. It's not. I think Parallax is an interesting one that I've kind of grown to really like over the years. Coming right out of the gate, out of the pilot, and dealing with the meshing of the crew, and what do you do with like who's in what role, who's going to be the chief engineer? Do we go with the Starfleet guy who's kind of the next natural choice, or do we give it to an unconventional choice, somebody who comes from the Maquis side of things, who's very talented but is volatile and has a long way to go, but is kind of an untapped. It's kind of the old coaching, like do you want the guy who I think they do a really nice job of taking really recognizable like workplace kind of dilemmas and making it a Star Trek kind of an issue, and unique to Voyager with the meshing of these two crews. So I like that about it. I like the way that B'Elanna is introduced, really. I mean, she's obviously very featured in Caretaker, but introduced in terms of like what's her role in the show going to be, and what kind of character is she going to be. I like that, but I mean, everything around that is very traditional. Like that could be a TNG episode. Like, oh, we bump into this anomaly, and there's this thing in there. Oh, it's us from the future, and That like the timey-wimey, anomaly of the week kind of thing is very much like a typical standard issue Star Trek episode, which there's
TNG light, yeah.
yeah, and there's comfort value in that for me, but it's definitely not the most successful thing about it. And, you have that at 10. I have it at 7. Um, Time and Again's an interesting one. I have it pretty low, 14. You have it pretty high at 8. That's another kind of time travel-y, Janeway Tom Paris, chicken and the egg kind of a problem episode.
Yeah.
What do you think kind of stood out for you to kind of put that in the middle of the pack? Was it did you just have a good time with it?
Yeah, I just had a good time with it. I like that you're kind of we're already getting into these early, really big sci-fi concept time situations, and I like that it's not like it's one of those episodes where it's not a necessarily happy ending, and
Yeah.
it's not like this anomalous thing that's happening with, or it's not necessarily the something and like it something affecting it's actually them being there, and so it's just like I kind of like that kind of sci-fi concept, and it's like one of those episodes where I'm like I kind of think about after the fact, and I'm like okay, like and they do talk about a little bit, I think, about just Prime Directive stuff in that, and I just think that's I just liked it this time around, I guess.
Sure.
So
yeah, I have a lot of memory with that. I have a lot of nostalgia for that one. I remember it. I remember being really young with Voyager starting, and that being an episode that like hit me as a little kid. I was like, "Wow, this is really cool." But
yeah, it's got some really good early Paris in it, I think, and yeah, it's good stuff, I think.
We both have ex post facto pretty low. Did it remind you of A Matter of Perspective? Like
I couldn't get past that. I was just like, this is sort of retelling a little bit, kind of, it's I don't know, it's a little bit of like corporal punishment type of commentary on it, but it's just like I couldn't get past it. I'm just like, was this Riker that was doing this? Or,
it definitely feels like something that could have. You mentioned like you sub in some TNG characters and it works pretty much the same way. I think to me it's kind of like a mesh of A Matter of Perspective with Riker or Paris going to the planet and flirting with a girl, and could it have happened the way maybe you could kind of squint and see it happening that way, and then it's got some like Necessary Evil Deep Space Nine like film noir elements. The way it leans into the film noir is different than A Matter of Perspective. A Matter of Perspective doesn't really get into that at all. That's not its aim. But Deep Space Nine certainly did that, and
it's like it is kind of really film noir, like Tuvok's the
detective,
grizzly detective, and there's black and white in it, so that automatically puts it a few points up. So
and I do like the stylistic embrace. Like I've said this before, I like it when Deep Space Nine does it. I even when the episode's not successful, I love the Star Trek can do that. I love the Star Trek can be like, yep, we're doing a film noir this week, and just kind of embrace those qualities and not in the fact that it can feel like it's part of the same show, and the next week it might be something completely different. So I appreciate it when they do that, even when it's not ultimately successful. I don't think Ex Post Facto is like memorable, or I don't think it shows Tom Paris in a great light.
No, doesn't. Yeah. Although he does admit what he does.
Yeah, he does.
He still does it.
Yeah.
Is he growing? I don't know, but he admits it. So.
He does admit it, and I guess in a sense, like it does help to, like knowing where Tom Paris ends up, and his journey kind of being about like redemption and embracing the second chance and becoming a better man. Getting things like this along, as difficult as they are to like sit through sometimes early on, where he does make mistakes like that and he does lean into those kind of skeevy tendencies. It does help sell the journey of where he ends up, I guess. But in the moment, it's tough because Yeah, he didn't behave himself very well
Yeah,
on that away mission.
because there's also like this moment where he's like, he's talking about how it's like, well, he's talking to Harry about he's like, there's going to be a moment where you can't even deny it. And I'm just like, oh god. And then that happens to Harry, I think, right? Isn't there this moment where he disobeys
Yes,
orders with
later on.
Janeway?
Yep.
Yeah, so I just thought that was kind of funny to tie those two together. This really cheesy line about how no, you gotta make the decision. Just oh man,
It's funny.
oh, you just can't help but laugh and smile about it.
Yep. Uh, it's not a huge difference, but prime factors is a 4 spot difference. You have it down at 12. I have it at 8. That's that's an interesting one for me. The aliens that they encounter there, the pleasure folks, are a little grating to me. I find them to be a little much, but I really like the home stretch of that episode. I love the fact that it's Tuvok who makes the logical decision to cheat and kind of take the fall for that decision and make the attempt. And I love the way Janeway reacts to that. I think there's some really good scenes late. I like when Voyager, especially early on, like you said in the first season, doesn't when it does elect to lean into these are two different crews that look at these dilemmas differently, and when you put them together and they exchange ideas and they're in a tough spot, sometimes their ideas will filter into each other. Like it's not as simple. What I love about it really is that it's not as simple as like all the Starfleet folks are like, nope, we can't do this. Like we're not dealing with them. We're not taking the technology. They said no. That's what the Prime Directive says. Done deal. And the Maquis are all like, of course we're going to try to take it. We're going to do what we have to do to try to get it.
Yeah.
But no, like they literally show them sitting around a table in the mess hall talking about it, convincing each other, and it gets messier. Like they see each other's points. They 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 don't all agree in the beginning or in the end, but it's I think it happens organically and it makes sense. That's what would happen in a tough situation like that. And to kind of telegraph that or put a pin in that at the end with Tuvok kind of stepping in to kind of be the senior officer who's willing to take the fall to make it happen and try is really good.
Yeah,
So I like that about it.
I think I agree. That's definitely the point.
Yeah.
Of the episode. It's not really like the pleasure planet and all that stuff, which is it's like a trope,
big time trope
with Star Trek. So, yeah, I just think that, and maybe this is a bigger conversation here, but I think that early Tuvok, they really play with your expectations and kind of perspective on Vulcans on a Starfleet ship. And I think it's not just in Prime Factors. Cathexis, there's a few other episodes or Learning Curve is also another one of those things where it's like, you think logic is right. That's what you're, and it's Janeway's, right hand, and he's always like the really like the lighthouse in the darkness, right? When all this is going, and Janeway talks about it, like, and so I think a lot of these, not a lot of, a handful of these episodes really play with your perspective on logic and Vulcan, and you're like, oh, how could this Vulcan like make his way to infiltrate this high, this Maquis crew, this really high profile Maquis crew? Well, now you know, because like there's a bunch of these episodes where it's like, oh, either Tuvok withholds some truth, he bends the rule, like he's just like not as he just plays with my perspective on Vulcans. And I think that's because I think we all as fans hold Spock in such high regard, and so I think that I think Tuvok is a different Vulcan.
Yes,
it's different in his own way.
And it helps three-dimensionalize Vulcans, I think. Like, not all Vulcans are the same. I think sometimes people fall into that trap. Every Vulcan should be like Spock. Well, should every human be like Kirk? No. Like, everybody's going to react to things differently, and they view logical solutions differently. They come to different determinations. They have different like worldviews and core beliefs that drive decisions. That's what people are. And yeah, the fact that Tuvok doesn't always do what you think maybe Spock would have done, to me is great. That's just like T'Pol or any other Vulcan character that kind of comes along. Like I just that's been a thing that's bothered me about Star Trek fans for a long time. Especially with Enterprise, people bash like the Vulcans shouldn't do this, shouldn't do that. They're not Vulcan enough. Well, they're not Spock enough for you, is what you're saying. Like,
Yeah, that's what you're saying. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So learning curve's another interesting one. You just mentioned it. You have it at 5. It's in your top 5. I have it at 11. I do like learning curve. I think it's another one. Like I can't look past the fact that it completely leans into the premise of the show. Like two crews, Starfleet Maquis. There are going to be naturally, just because of the nature of who the Maquis is, there's going to be a handful of people who are like, "F this, I'm not doing the Starfleet thing. Like I'm not conforming to these ridiculous rules." And like I didn't choose this. I've never been to the academy. I never wanted to go to the academy. And now you're asking me to operate this way? Like hell no. And the way that episode tackles that and examines like leadership styles and how to mentor difficult employees. Like again, when you get older and you watch these episodes in like workplace mindsets, it's crazy how many different lenses you can really look at these things through.
This is also the start of the Neelix, kind of the start of Neelix and Tuvok, like
yeah.
Mr. Vulcan stuff with
Yeah.
helping him kind of. He gives the flower.
The flower,
yeah. So yeah, I really like that. There's some stuff with Neelix that I'm not too fond of, but there's some really good stuff, like in this episode, Learning Curve and Tutrell, obviously, and a few other ones, but yeah.
Neelix is one of the more interesting. We've talked about him before on Trek Live. I think if you go back to some of our earliest episodes, I remember one of the first things probably early like single digits episodes. You talked about Neelix one time, and it just sticks in my mind as like I love Dan. He's the man. Early because you just like put your finger on something with Neelix. There's just a lot to him as you go through the show. There's he grows a lot, he changes a lot, his strengths and weaknesses kind of evolve, and people have such polarized views of how successful or not he is as a character that I think have changed a lot over the years. I just, as somebody who lived the show as it came out, I felt like it was very hip for people to say, I hate Neelix. Like bottom tier character was very much a popular sentiment that you would find in the cesspools of the internet at the time. But I really think time and more nuanced views and have really changed that. And I was never completely anti-Neelix. I was mixed. I had, just like I do now, there are things about his character, especially early on, that I don't find as successful. But as the show goes on, I think he's a great character, and I think he's essential to that crew and an undeniable like force in the ensemble. That's so core to like why that show is great. And I'll be interested. What I'm trying to get at is as you go through the show and you kind of chart like when he's really working and when he's not. I think that's one of the more interesting kind of threads to kind of follow, because you're right. Like there are things with obviously the Kess stuff that you watch and you can't help but like why are we doing this? Like you guys didn't know that this was gonna age like awfully.
Jeez,
really, really bad. Like why did you do this? But then in the same breath, he can have a scene like he does in Learning Curve with Tuvok, or he's got scenes with Janeway kind of all sprinkled throughout, where I think he's awesome. He's great. And I think they really figure him out as time goes on, and they find interesting things for him to do and be. So.
Yeah, he's a lot to unpack. I mean, he's just like the living embodiment of the Delta Quadrant on the bridge.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I don't know, it's really important to, I think, adding color and a staple to, I don't know, this crew.
100%. 100%. Um, I think the closest parallel to him is really Book. Like I think the way that Book operates is like the eyes and ears of the 32nd century for Discovery and Burnham and Saru and the key characters. Like having somebody who's from that
Yeah.
time, from that era, being familiar with what you're going to find in those early days, especially, and becoming like and being like sort of an outsider influence on the crew.
Flocks as well,
It
but
flocks
yeah,
too,
yeah,
absolutely. Being a little more familiar with what's out there and what you're going to find, and having a little more nuanced, seasoned approach to these things, um, is a core thing for Voyager and important. Um, did any other characters, like you mentioned, like Neelix being kind of a mixed and liking some things, not liking others? Anybody else kind of, and you kind of said the same thing with the Doctor, the way the Doctor's kind of treated and handled in the show. Like, what other characters kind of stood out to you as like maybe you can go anywhere with this. Characters that you thought were like spot on right out of the gate, awesome, kind of as you remember them, or just an earlier version of as you think of them, or other characters that you kind of felt like, maybe a little more mixed. Like, what do you think of the characterization of the different folks on the show?
yeah. I think I think they do a fairly good job of really introduction or like giving an introduction to each um, character. I think that each character gets their kind of own, so it's hard to be like, okay, who is kind of the biggest
Most key,
character
yeah,
character of the season. It's like
it's pretty well
it's
evenly spread.
really evenly spread throughout the season. I think there's some,
Agreed.
earlier Tom stuff in the front half of the season, but not so much in the. But I mean, he's still there. He's still making decisions. He's still at the helm. But
Mm-hmm.
I think they do a good job of kind of spreading their wealth and kind of giving everybody some introductory stuff to do, um, which is a tall task for a show like this, and with a lot of different
Yeah,
characters and moving parts, and you got a shortened season as well, so that kind of plays at least for Terminator
that's
stuff.
standard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I think they do actually a fairly good job of um, really finding a home for each of these characters. I think that yeah, it's really hard to kind of pinpoint one because I think that all of them do a good job of at least finding a spot. Their spot now might be different 2 or 3 seasons later, but I think um, they do a good job. And by this time, like I think that um, the Star Trek creatives in the writers' room know kind of how to spread the wealth,
yeah.
for good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
Some aspects might be bad, some might be good. So um, I just think that like it feels different. Like, and I guess it's a different writer staff kind of a little bit too. But yeah, as far as like introducing characters versus Deep Space Nine to
Yeah, I think
Voyager.
it reminds me a lot of like the bulk back end of TNG, the way it very kind of naturally bounced from okay, this is a
Yeah,
Crusher episode, this is a Worf episode, this is a Deanna episode.
yeah.
This feels the same. Like you kind of go from you know Tom to Harry to Neelix, like to the Doctor, the way that it bounces around and kind of consciously is like this is an episode about fill in the blank. Um,
Whereas Deep Space Nine goes, I feel like, at least from what I remember, it wasn't necessarily like that.
not as I think it's more fluid. I mean, because it's such a big cast, I think it's more about the relationships and there's pairs of them or triads of them that would get thrown together. Uh, the
But it's hard to compare apples and oranges
yeah,
because again, it's like
hmm
we're on a bridge here. Doing it's a completely different setup of shows.
yeah,
So it's
exactly.
hard to compare those two.
Yeah, yeah, but it does. I mean, when I think about how that works, it does definitely remind me of that later end of TNG, which makes sense. I guess Michael Piller, it's Jerry Taylor. They were big. I mean, Michael Piller was on Deep Space Nine at the beginning too, but they were
Yeah.
both big. Like that season 3 to 7 TNG is Michael Piller and Jerry Taylor, kind of running the show. So, um, yeah, was Caretaker an easy number one for you? Like, did you feel like that was like was that well ahead of Eye of the Needle, or was that a
No,
fairly
it's it's
close?
it's it's pretty close.
Close.
that's definitely tough. Um, Petrel feels solid at 3, but those two, I feel like you could go back and forth.
Yeah, I have
I
over the years.
think that's a really cool. Um, I think both really have unique things about them that I think if you're hitting it this certain time, it's going to be higher than the other.
Hmm.
Caretaker has obviously starts the show with this really big moral dilemma, like what do we do?
Hmm.
And I think that will always be a point of fascination with Star Trek. And so, but Eye of the Needle is such a cool sci-fi concept that feels so early Voyager and so
Hmm.
Voyager in its in itself.
Hmm.
So that is going to be always every time I rewatch season 1. That's always going to be a point to look for is which is going to edge
The other,
the
yeah,
other. Yeah.
yeah. The way Eye of the Needle delivers its twists, like we got a wormhole, at least the Alpha Quadrant, but it's a Romulan, and like, and he's
Even
not.
more, it's
It's
not in the
yeah,
right time.
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's
The
this
way that.
variant that they talk about. Like, there's some episodes
Mhm.
in this season where they like focus on this technobabble. That's like there's another one that I think it's in. I don't know. They talk about the event horizon, the event horizon this, the
Parallax.
event
Yep.
horizon that. Yeah,
Yeah.
like they
Hmm.
use that term so much.
Yes.
And same with this, there's this variance. There's this variance
This variance. What
quite.
is this variance?
Yeah. Oh, we finally found out what the variance is. It's like
Yeah.
displaced in time. Yeah.
Yeah. It's such a like it captures that feeling of like the people like there's a realness to the getting excited about something and then getting like crash down and then picking yourself back up and crash down again.
Crash.
Like
Yeah.
it's just and then it's so elevated by the dilemma of Voyager being out there. Like they're thinking it's like early on telling the audience like this is not something that's gonna get solved. Like we're gonna have ups and downs, but it's gonna take time and it's gonna be emotionally trying on the crew. I think is the big thing. Yeah, I love Eye of the Needle. I think the way that the twists are rolled out and the punch of Tuvok in the transporter room saying, yeah,
You feel it. You feel it.
yeah, you do. The letdown,
Yeah.
the disappointment. I think it's actually a
Yeah.
really good Harry Kim episode because as the ensign who's the most prone to
Full of life.
feeling
Yeah.
the optimism and like this is gonna work. It's gotta work, right? It's definitely gonna work. There's no way this isn't gonna work. He feels the crash of the not being pessimistic. You know, there's definitely a mentality that a lot of people develop as they age and like to kind of hope for the best, prepare for the worst. And
Yeah.
when you're younger, you don't necessarily do that. And I think I think you see it on Harry Kim's face the whole time in that episode. Cool. Well, yeah, Voyager season one's really fun. It's different. Like it's crazy. I think this happens obviously with TNG and Deep Space Nine. Like if you were to watch a season one episode, pick any random one, and then you skip ahead to like season 6 or 7, they feel like the same show, but at the same time they feel very much like different shows. I think Voyager is very much in that boat too. Just the way the character interactions play is different. Uh, different emphases with the characters. Uh, the show it really is kind of jarring to go back to the beginning of it and see how much it changes because of where it ends up. Uh, Sometimes season one of Voyager feels like a different show to me. Like I go back and I'm like, man, this is like
And different characters.
yeah,
They feel different. Yeah. The Doctor's so grizzled
yeah,
and prickly, and
hmm,
which is understandable because it's the way the crew treats him. But
definitely,
yeah.
yeah, yep. And I just we've talked about this before. The way that the Doctor evolves into taking the Kess handoff for
Yeah.
7
Now he's the
is
mentor.
yeah,
For 7, and then also in Prodigy, which
yes,
he also does as well. So yeah, that little where he ends up. That's really cool. And that's
absolutely.
in Prodigy. So
I think that's as good a segue as any to kind of spend the last maybe 20 minutes here talking Prodigy season 2. We both finished it, right? Are you finished?
Yep. Yep. You finished. Yep.
Finished. I watched it over 2 or 3 days. I do not have ranks. Dan does not have ranks. It just didn't. I'm not ready for that. The whole way that I watched this was faster than Dan. But Dan watched it pretty quick too, right? Like, I mean, in all
I finished it
respects,
this week.
hmm
Yeah, at the beginning of this week.
still that's 20
But
episodes in pretty short order.
yeah, I know. If you're talking about how, you know, my 2 and almost 2.5 year old watch it with me too,
Yeah,
that is also a
factor.
um, big factor as well.
Hmm
So yeah, um, yeah, it was definitely an interesting experience, and to be able to rank these is tough because it was like a 2 or 3 episode run,
Yeah,
or of like over like my normal like an episode a night or episode every other night. That feels a little different. But
yeah.
it's and then it's hard to like to rank those. So again, that's why I don't have ranks. That's tough.
Yeah, it's really tough. I'm not ready yet. I'm thinking I'm gonna hold on that until since I'm into the new stuff. When I get to it in the rewatch, I'll watch it like I watch everything else and do my best with it there. I have an idea in my head of like I know what episodes I love the most, and I know which episodes I didn't love as much. Um, and with this show, it's different. I mean, I don't know this. I mean, it's very possible that the episodes I like least are the episodes that your daughter might like the most, which is kind of natural for a show like this, right? Like, I found that in season one too. The episodes that reminded me while I was watching it. Oh yeah, this is a kid show. Like it's built to work on that front as well. It's not just a kid show, but it's aimed to be appealing to, you know, all sorts. Um, and that's especially why I was like struggling with rating and ranking with this new stuff, especially Prodigy, because like, am I really gonna like poo poo an episode because it's aimed at the youngest audience? No, like it's not. It's no disrespect. It's great. It maybe works less for me as a 30 something, you know, curmudgeon guy, um, but that's just my perspective. I mean, so I know which episodes are probably going to be at like towards the bottom of my list, and I know which ones are at the top. But the mushy middle, like, and where it all kind of falls out, I have no clue. But I loved it. I'll say that I really did love it. It surprised me. I can't believe how complicated it is. My head is not completely wrapped around all of it yet with the time travel
Yeah,
and the
even because
it's
if you look close, you're like, so if they fix the timeline
mhm.
with this, like the reason why they fixed the reason why they all came together.
Yeah.
So then they don't come together. So then they don't fix the timeline. It's just like like I'm still like my mind is
Yeah,
boggled
I
because like
know.
so if they fixed it, then they didn't fix it. But then if they fixed it, then they don't fix it, and it's just like this
It's
like a
yeah,
cycle. It's just
yeah.
like what is happening? And this is I think as far as for my experience, like the best shows, that's what they're like. I'll use I feel like I mentioned this like every other episode, but like Bluey is a kids show
Yeah,
that parents can watch as well.
yeah.
And I'm slowly thinking more and more it's a show for parents that kids can watch.
Yes, yeah.
So it's just like
Yes. Yes.
that's kind of what I'm feeling that Prodigy is this
I
season
think
at
so.
least. It's like an episode for everybody that kids can watch.
Yes.
And so I think for me it's a little bit different because I think there's some scarier moments for my 2.5 year old
Sure.
over for someone. If it was like a 4 or 5 year old, I think it would be
Of course.
fine. But
Yeah.
so yeah, I think Bill's right. There's going to be some. That's why rankings are tough. I think there's some stuff that when Zero goes to the planet and there's this really colorful and there's everybody's feasting. I think that one is going to be a little bit more higher than on the younger audience as far as like you know
Mm-hmm.
some characters having this existential crisis,
Yes.
and it's
Yeah.
just like
Mm-hmm.
it's really good.
It
And the
is.
fact that it turns itself the way that time works. It's like the way that it comes out. It's like yeah, we have to reset everything, but then it kind of makes you want to go rewatch the first season again.
Yes.
And I think that's just really good.
Yeah. It's really well done. It's really well put together. as somebody who's in the middle of Discovery season 2, which I really like. I think Prodigy does a better job with the time travel. You know, what is the term? The causality loop
Yeah,
challenges that you just mentioned.
yeah,
Like they're confusing as hell in Prodigy too. But I think
yeah,
they do a better job of like acknowledging, yeah, this is confusing. It's complicated. We don't totally understand it either. Than and making it convincing on that front than Discovery does in its second season. I think they struggle a little bit with some of it as the season goes on, with having it all kind of make complete sense. Um, this, yeah, for a show being aimed the way, like you nailed it. I mean, I think that's what the folks who made the show would be aiming to. It's a show for everybody. I think is what they would like. It's got to work on a number of levels. It's got to appeal to your daughter on one level, but it's trying to appeal to you in a completely different way, and it's got to do it both simultaneously. Um, and yeah, I think it's really smart. I think the characters are really well done. They have legitimate arcs. I think Zero is a great Star Trek character who deals with some big things about identity and self acceptance and how they perceive themselves. In true Star Trek fashion, being like the way Data wants to be human and misses not having this or that, the way that the Doctor wants to experience the same things that his crewmates do. Zero is dealing with all of those
same
same
thing.
things
Yeah,
through
that's a Star Trek
their
trope.
own.
Yeah,
It is a
yeah,
trope, but it's very human. It's something that we all deal with, like envy of others around you who might have things that you do not, even though you have things that are unique to you that those same people might not have. That's such a core principle of like the kinds of things Star Trek I think aims to talk about in unique ways throughout each of the shows. I think Prodigy found a really cool, unique way to do that and create an interesting new character who really holds up as a great one. I love when Zero is the focus of the show. I love the show. I always love the show, but that's when I feel the most like, holy, this is Star Trek. This is great Star Trek. When Zero is being spotlighted and is hitting on all cylinders. Um, but I think Gwen is a great Star Trek character too. The way that she deals with changing perspectives and uh, you think about where that character is at the beginning through season 1 and where she ends up at the end of season 2. Uh, it's a great cast. I think they're all really good, and I think they did a nice job with building a cast of characters that are a good ensemble. The way that Star Trek characters are, the found family. We talk about that all the time. Like these shows are all the same with that from beginning to end, and Prodigy is no different. Um,
when you're lost, find the place you're needed most. Like
yes. Yep.
that is so that to my core. That's
Uh-huh.
just so Star Trek to me,
Yes.
and it's it's just so good. Like it's
Hmm.
I know, like Chakotay is like lost cause. That guy is the lost cause guy. If you're a lost cause, he wants and he's willing to do the lost cause thing. And I think just the crew coming back to kind of say like that's so Star Trek. So yeah, it's really good show. It's really good.
It is, and I think the two-parter with Chakotay being found with the
Those
protostar.
might be top episodes. I think
Yes.
for me. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's so good.
The first part with it being sort of like how Chakotay got his groove back, how the crew kind of pulls him back from the abyss of being alone with hologram Janeway and the ship, dealing with the loss of his crew and his first officer. Like, there's some really grim stuff with that. When they find the first
Yeah,
officer's
skeleton. Like that's just like oh boy, this is a
Yikes.
kid show. Like yeah, I mean it's a big emotional beat. I
It
think for
is.
yeah, it is scary, but it's also it feels like a big emotional
Mhm.
beat as well. So it's yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's really good.
Like Chakotay's got the little figures of the crew and Janeway. Like that's great. Uh,
Yeah,
Chakotay is pretty well used in Prodigy. I think they kind of rescue that character a little bit. I mean, he's I think he's really good in the beginning of Voyager as well. Minus, I think some of the I think the Native American tropes are pretty poorly aged and
Yeah,
not
that's
good
not
at
aged well.
all in
Yeah.
early Voyager, and that really limits the character in some ways. Like when they lean into his unique qualities, sometimes they have to lean into those things, and they're kind of flawed from the beginning. And then towards as the show as Voyager progresses, they kind of shed some of that stuff, and then Chakotay's left without some of those
Much.
core.
Yeah,
Yeah,
identity.
he's
Yeah.
just kind of a first officer who sometimes clashes with Janeway, um, but has a very strong connection with Janeway at the same time, which is what I think is the best thing about the character. I think that conflicted, um, you know, the relationship with Janeway, I think, is actually a really strong component to Voyager all through. When they choose to emphasize it, and I think it's even made stronger now that you see where it ends up in Prodigy, how they kind of continue to be that way. Um, but yeah, I love what they do with Chakotay. There's a scene in part two where Chakotay's sitting with Dahl on the edge of the ship, and they talk to each other about kind of their common backgrounds of being like rebels and finding their place. That quote you just dropped, I'm pretty sure is from that scene. Find where you need to be. That's a great moment. I mean, that's a great Prodigy moment. It's a great Star Trek moment. The way that those two characters bond, and you kind of, I think Jim. I was talking to Jim at one point from Trek Ranks, and his takeaway from that scene is like Dal is Chakotay and Chakotay is Dal. Like they have
Yeah.
really common.
That's exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's so cool. Like that's not something I would have thought of until those two guys were sitting next to each other talking about life and ups and downs, and it's pretty cool. So I'm definitely one of the most pleasant surprises of this era of Star Trek to me is Prodigy. That the concept of Prodigy when they announced the show, that was the one of the five, obviously, of the current shows that we know of, that I felt the most like. I don't know. Is it going to be for me? Like how aimed at children is it going to be? How accessible is it going to be for an adult who doesn't have kids, who thinks of Star Trek a certain way? Like, is it going to work for me? And resoundingly, yes. I mean, I think it's very much a Star Trek show. Like you said, I think you nailed it. It's a show for parents that kids can watch in the room. You're not, it's not like Discovery or Picard, especially, where there might be scenes where you're like, no, you got to watch it at a certain time when you got TV to yourself. Where Prodigy, you don't have to worry about that. It's something that you can have on, and your daughter can absorb some Star Trek, something that Daddy loves very much, and kind of get a taste of it, and in a way that's friendly to her. So I think it accomplishes that mission while also being like really interesting and cool and fun to think about and unpack. The way that it ends, like we didn't even talk about this. I haven't heard this talked about enough. I mean, I'm sure it is, but I haven't dived into the deep conversation much yet. The way it ends, like bubbling right into Picard with the
Yeah,
synth
that's
stuff.
huge.
That's unbelievable. I
Yeah,
couldn't
that is
believe they were
huge.
doing that.
Yeah. That is because there was always that was really a mixed bag too, and I was like, oh, we're actually going
Yeah,
there, like
yeah.
that is
That's crazy.
crazy.
I
That's
could
a
not believe it.
hard clicking into the franchise.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. The
that
way
is
that they, yeah,
that's
exactly. The way
cool.
they
Yeah,
click together.
yeah,
Like seeing those characters, like sitting on the Academy grounds, like watching the synth attack on Mars happening, that we already know about and have a strong perspective about, is wild. That I just I never would have dreamt that they were going to
yeah,
bump that right into it, and dealing with Dr. Crusher and Wesley. We didn't even talk about Wesley being in it, and
yeah.
uh, and Baby Jack, like the way that it
Yeah,
takes,
that's
it's
yeah,
wild.
yeah.
It's crazy.
Clicks itself into the
Yeah,
franchise because like I feel like just because I don't know why, just because maybe because of the medium, it just felt so far away from the other franchise. Maybe
not anymore.
no, it's like clicks
it's,
in.
it's
Yeah,
connecting these shows together. Yeah, yeah, it's cool. Um, I think they do some great things with Wesley too. Like he's, you know, I think given where he is at the end of TNG, where he kind of just he's gone. Like they edge him back in a little bit at the end of Picard season 2, um, which kind of teased this up nicely that that's what he's doing. Like you kind of see that he's still out there doing these kinds of things. Kind of get you ready for the perspective that you're going to get in Prodigy. Um, yeah, I think it makes Wesley kind of heroic again in a way. Like he's very much not at the end of TNG, where he's kind of like flunking out of the academy and kind of being a jerk.
Even a Picard,
And
right?
then, yeah,
I feel like it grounds him a little bit. Like
hmm
he feels so like otherworldly,
yeah,
and when he gets to come back and be like have to be like with the normal
people
folks,
again.
yeah, when he's got to
Yeah,
like, okay, what was it? What I got to go back to what it meant to be
yeah,
a Starfleet officer, and not like just the other planes of existence.
right.
And so I really like that. That like had like a 3-dimensional aspect to it.
Agreed, agreed. Um, yeah, we could talk about Prodigy for an hour. I mean, we could totally. I know there are a lot of shows out there who this format that they took really put people like us, people who like to talk about these things in these kinds of formats, in a bind. Like, what do? Do you spend? Some shows are doing every week. They're tackling like 2 episodes. They're tackling like 5 episodes. A lot of people are kind of doing this. They're just talking about it broadly for now. Um, it, did you like? How would you feel if all Star Trek came out the way that this did?
I would not like that.
I would not like that either.
I think the things get missed, and I
Yeah.
think, and you know, it lends itself to rewatching. But
hmm
I like to ruminate week to week,
Me too.
and you know, I think that it, um, I think that's just the mark of watching Star Trek is, um, and I think that is an element of bringing old fans in the same perspective as kind of new fans. I think that, you know, older fans remember week to week checking the TV guide, you know, all these things, um, you know, talking about like, you know, did you watch Star Trek this week? What'd you think?
Yeah.
Like things like that. Like not where are you at with
Yeah. Where are you? Are you at
which is
12
hard
or 8?
because that's such a old TV thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's kind of like the only thing that the old TV is kind of hanging on by a thread is we still do week to week stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it's just a better opportunity to be able to market. So I would prefer to stay
Week to week.
for my sanity week to week.
I couldn't agree more. I like that better. I think it allows the episodes to breathe a little more in the way that I want them to. It just becomes for me like it's a two-pronged problem. I have no self-control and I want to watch it. So I'm going to binge it. And then second, I'm afraid of being I don't want to be hamstrung by like I can't go on Twitter, I can't talk to anybody because I'm going to get spoiled accidentally or on purpose. So that
Yeah,
puts me in a spot where I'm like I got to hurry up so I can be normal again and have my normal routine, which stinks because I prefer all things being equal to spread them out and let the episodes kind of. That's why if I ranked Discovery season 5 at the end as soon as I watched the finale. Basically, I could do it because each of those episodes kind of lived in my head as the new thing for a week, and it allowed them to, even in a serialized show like that, those episodes felt distinctive enough to me for me to be able to sort out those kinds of ways of thinking about it. Where it was really hard because of the way I watched it.
that's why I'm not a huge fan of screeners. So if a screener comes out and there's 3 episodes available and you're talking about it,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's, again, our perspectives are going to be
Different.
So
Yes.
that's why I take people who have screeners opinion with a grain of salt
Sometimes, yeah.
initially. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
just because like they see it through 3 episode chunks or however they do. I don't know how they do it, but
Mm-hmm.
um, that's where it's tough for me to
Yeah. Yeah.
this process of doing big chunks. Yeah, I'm not a fan of.
There are probably folks out there because I know that's how it generally works. Like they get a screener and it's got a big chunk of the episodes. Like this model of watching Prodigy probably bothered those folks less because that's what if I got a screener of the first 6 episodes of Discovery season 5, you know what I would have done. Like there's no doubt, right? I mean, I would have done it and I would have bitched about it the next day. I shouldn't have done that. That wasn't good for me, but I would have done it and I would do it again because I have no self control about these things. So folks like that who do that probably weren't as bothered by the binging effect of this, but it was new to me, and I've watched shows that way before, but not Star Trek for the first time. So that was different, and it's definitely going to be a unique thing. It's going to make Prodigy season 2 memorable to me in a way. Like it's always going to be like that one that was a little different that I watched that way. So that's gonna help stand it out in some respects. Um, but my big takeaway is I loved it. I really did. And again, I really would say that even more so than Lower Decks, that's the thing about this era of Star Trek that has surprised me the most. And it was like the most pleasant surprise for me. I don't know if you would agree with that, because I know you were kind of skeptical about Lower Decks too, like the whole animation, diving into that, like before we knew about what the show was and kind of got the real feel for it. Um, Being kind of ambivalent about the idea. I felt that about Prodigy early on, and loving it as much as I do, and kind of thinking of it the same way that I do with a lot of the other shows is a really nice, pleasant surprise that I'm really grateful for. So,
Yeah.
okay. Any last thoughts on Prodigy before we kind of wrap this up and go for about an hour, a little over an hour? So,
I don't think so. Um,
so we could talk about it in
yeah,
all kinds of ways forever.
Yeah,
Like this is very
really,
much a broad view, general reaction, like fresh, quick take.
yeah, really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed Voyager. I love just being in this complete headspace. And yes, I am excited for season 2. Although there are some rough patches in the next couple seasons, but
Some good stuff too, though.
To tackle it and also rank it and keep going. So
great, looking forward to it. Voyager season 2 is really interesting. Like you said, it's got some ups, it's got its downs, but a lot of juicy stuff to tackle, and we'll definitely be doing that here. And Comic-Con coming up in a couple weeks. It sounds like there's going to be a lot going on there. With I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility that we'll get a Section 31 trailer, maybe a release date. Hopefully, it sounds like some Strange New World stuff, maybe a trailer there. Maybe some Starfleet Academy news. They have a panel with all these shows being featured. So I think we will have a lot to talk about in the next couple weeks with new stuff and what the timeline for the future looks like. And some of those things are big. Section 31 is one of those, like, we don't really know anything about it. And a trailer, I think, could shed some interesting light on, like, what it's going to look like, feel like, when's it take place, who's in it, what's it. I feel like that's going to be a big hurdle for a lot of people to kind of get eyes on it, and at least the way a trailer can do. So.
Yep, the discussion does not have to stop here. Twitter and Discord probably the best places to get keep that Star Trek discussion going. I thank everybody for watching. We'll be back as soon as we can
soon.
next time. Yeah, soon. And yeah, thank everybody for watching, and we look forward to seeing everybody soon.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.